if I was in a place in my life where I couldn't turn this into a business, which is still terrifying and still very hard, I would still probably be drawing things at 2 a.m. Um, for nobody to see, for no one to enjoy but me.
Welcome to the Flying Fruit Bar, a platform dedicated to the discussion and exploration of art and the creative process. I'm the host and creator, Phelan, and today is the second part of a two-part episode with artist Phelan Harris. If you haven't heard part one yet, please listen to last week's episode, as this part is a direct continuation of the conversation. Thank you very much. Phelan's art blends history and humanity, exploring the way in which past civilizations have used mark making to record and document their existence throughout time. So a lot of the work seems to have like a sense of mythology, and I'm kind of curious, like, do you is that deliberate, and do you want to create work that is universal, or like that it has ties to history?
100%. So, outside of being a visual artist, I really, really, really love archaeology.
Oh, wow.
If I wasn't an artist, I think my other not very lucrative career path was going to be archaeology of some kind, because I just, I cannot get enough of rediscovering the past. In so many ways, things like historical sewing. I love practicing, real techniques from the last several centuries. Handmade pottery and things like that. Like it feels more real when you understand the past, when you delve into history, because humanity changes quite a bit, but our needs do not. So, in viewing these, things like mythological creatures and ridiculous illustrations of them, have you seen a unicorn? It looked like a deformed rhino, but they called it a unicorn. But that historical context, that old lens of viewing something just kind of lends it a certain magic, a little bit of time travel. And I really, really love that, because I think appreciating humanity, existing in a society, and trying to filter and absorb everything that's thrown at us every day is a lot easier when you understand the past. Especially the last few years, I had so many friends and family who would tell me, XYZ crazy thing just happened, or, they're doing this over here, isn't it terrible? And, the world's ending. And I'm like, do you have any idea how many times the world has ended?
Yeah.
I'm really not impressed right now. And so pulling from mythology and history and old ideas of things, old concepts is comforting because it's universal. And I want that comfort. It's the same reason that everybody's dressing in cottagecore and nightcore and all this fantasy stuff, because it's very comforting. We return to the past in order to face the future. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, because obviously we have, like, nowadays, especially just in culture nowadays generally, we have such a wave of nostalgia, particularly if you're like a 90s kid, like I am. Like, there's so much kind of 90s culture floating around now, and I'm like, I remember this, like 20 years ago. So
yeah,
weird.
it's wild. Kids are like wearing platforms and jean skirts, and I'm like, slow down.
Yeah, and I'm just like, okay, but hey, it's the way it is. I mean, everything comes around though, doesn't it? That's the thing.
Yeah, it's a cycle of a certain number of years that I can't remember now. But
I think it's like 7 or something like that, like every 7 years or something like that. I don't know, but it's interesting because it's like, I always like to see how people modernize something old, and like, because obviously, because even if like 90s stuff comes back, it's never fully 90s how it was, because obviously the times are so different. It's like it's 90s but with 2023 mixed into it, and it's like it becomes it's almost like a parallel universe 90s, because it's not. It's kind of interesting. Even just stuff like in music nowadays, where we have a huge kind of craze of like house influence everywhere, and like house, disco, and like synthwave everywhere in literally every song you hear nowadays. And it's like it's cool, but where's the future? You know, we're in
Right.
2023. You know, where's the next wave of music coming from? But I don't know. But
No,
anyway,
that is a
no, no,
thought that
no,
I've had.
so no,
Sorry.
continue. No, continue. I was like, that's just a random aside. Yeah, that's cool.
No, but the thing is, it's not random at all because, in along the same lines of thinking, using something from the past in a brand new modern context,
Hmm.
is it new? Is it different? Is it really a new creation?
Yeah,
Um, like using the example of historical sewing. Like I'm using techniques from the 18th century to just make a dress, normal
yeah.
dress, but the hand sewing technique in a modern context is a brand new creation. And so I really hope that what I'm doing with the kind of cephalide, the werewolves, it translates into something new without being something old. Because that is a quiet fear, is am I making something new? Is what I'm doing, is it just a vehicle for my experience, my emotions, my process, or is it legitimate on its own in a brand new context? So yeah.
See, that's an interesting thought because my next question for you is like, do you consider your work to be a form of escapism for yourself and or your audience?
I can't speak for my audience. It might be. I'm not really sure. I've had a lot of people come up to me, and some of the most meaningful comments I've gotten on it have been something along the lines of, I just really felt this illustration, which is awesome. That's what I want. Um, but I don't see that as a form of escapism. I see that as sort of a grounding experience. Um, This is a terrible but very effective example. It's like if you stub your toe,
Yeah.
you're very aware of your body in that moment. And so when people get this, I know I've never had anybody say, "Oh my gosh, it's a werewolf. It's so ugly," or, "That's so overwhelming. Where are their
Mm.
clothes?" Nobody has said that to me yet. So I like to think that the shock of the imagery and the gut reaction that it produces, um, I think that's the meat of it. I think that's where it's at. And so it doesn't feel like escapism. It feels more like being forced into the present, which is what happens when I create it. For me personally, I don't really draw anything unless I'm having a reaction to something. Um, call it emotional allergies. I'm very sensitive. If I see a phrase that evokes a memory, um, I hear a song with a very specific lyric to it, it usually takes me somewhere else. I have an idea. Um, it's transportive, but not escapism. It's how does this make me feel to sit on the therapist couch? How does this make me feel in the present moment? You
Mm.
know, um, am I furious? Am I frustrated? Am I sad? Am I grieving? All of these very visceral, very sudden emotions. Because like I've always had big feelings. I cry about trees and things like that.
Yeah.
I cannot help it because existence is huge. Existence is an emotional experience. And so giving myself the opportunity to explore that brings me way more into the present than I otherwise would be, being overwhelmed by what I feel or what I'm experiencing. So, yeah, I think it's more of a grounding thing than it is escapism.
That's actually really nice because that's not necessarily what I would have thought from looking at your work. And it's kind of interesting because to me, when I saw your work, I was like, this is very different. I was like, this is so different from a lot of things I see. And I'm like, obviously, it made me very curious, hence me asking you for an interview. But like, that's the interesting thing about your work is that it does actually spark curiosity because you're like, but why?
Oh, good.
I want to ask you about the titles of your work. So you have some titles here that I wrote down. So Broken
Mm.
Trust, Too Good, Sing the Painful Song, and Holding. Like, where do you get the titles of your work from? And how important are words in relation to your imagery?
So, I always pull the words. I get the title before I do the illustration.
Oh wow,
Because
that's cool.
I'll see a phrase, I'll read a poem, or be sort of perusing somebody else's musings, and I I really like words. In a past life, I was a writer. I wanted to be a writer at one point because I again, a certain universal tool for expression. Most everybody understands, English, all of English, at least to a certain extent. Even if you don't speak English, you can see certain words in English, and because it's so ubiquitous, people recognize it. So,
Like
as
Coca-Cola.
it's what?
Like Coca-Cola.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I'll have a visceral reaction to a word or a phrase that means something to me because of something else from the past. I have really strong associations with music, different kinds of music, because there's really not a genre that I wasn't introduced to first. There isn't, I've got a preconceived idea, a notion of a flavor that comes with something already. And so when I have a reaction to it, my favorite thing is to sit down and just follow my nose. So like with which one? So for example, like sing the painful song. So, and this is a whole lot of ancient history that, doesn't mean anything to anybody but me, which is why it became a title. But so to make a long story short, my parents divorced very recently, like last year. And, you know, one of those relationships where, they got married and, wanted to make it work, but it was never a healthy relationship. Um, I'm not gonna like cast blame because it's a relationship. It's two people usually making mistakes together and exacerbating them together. So, that finally happened. And so a lot of the words that have an effect on me, or the phrases that have an effect on me, are related to me processing that massive change. Because it's the dissolution of a relationship that made all of me, down to my physical self, and influenced who I am as a person and the things that I like. And I mean, it's a ridiculous knotted ball of spaghetti. But like listening to an oldies playlist, because my parents were very much into oldies music. They were both DJs together at the same radio station for a little
Oh,
while. And so I grew up listening to cassettes with 60s pop on it, and classic rock and roll, singer-songwriter stuff. And so I was listening to this oldies playlist, asking myself, do I really want to keep listening to this? Because it's really upsetting. Because I associate all of this music with my parents, with people who I just endlessly adore. I love them so much, and I miss them. And so in that absence and that heightened emotional state, I ended up picking out songs that I felt sort of represented our little triad, our little teeny tiny nuclear family. So I picked a song for each of us, wrote them down on the back of this piece of paper, and did a wolf to go with what I was feeling, to just sort of face this really uncomfortable emotional process, to face the hurt, to face the disappointment, all that good stuff. And so to sort of synthesize it together into a title on the front of the page, I picked that, Sing the Painful Song, because as much as I love this music, as universally loved as it is, these are really old songs, it still hurts. So, but you sing it anyway because it's beautiful. So
wow.
every title is like that, it's
Yeah.
this weird rabbit trail of, I felt this, I had to put it down on paper. If I didn't put it down on paper, I was probably going to keep crying for 3 days. And I don't like crying. I'm just a crier.
Yeah.
It's a terrible hobby. I don't recommend it. Um, So yeah, the titles usually are born out of needing to put a label on things. You pack up somebody's old belongings in a box and you put it in the attic, but you label it because you
Yeah.
want to know what's in there. You want to know what it's about without necessarily having to reopen it. So, yeah.
That's a nice way to put it, but also it's kind of interesting how something that is very unrelated to werewolves can actually
Mhm.
really inspire, or like just kind of things in the outside world can inspire you to have thoughts, feelings, and emotions that then generate the work, as opposed
Mhm.
to just being like, oh, this is like a nice word, or oh, this is like there's a reason for that phrase to exist in the way in which it exists for you, or like to have those feelings for you, and then from that you create a piece of work which or in turn will exist for someone else in a certain way, how they're feeling towards that. It's like an emotional, what we're thinking of, emotional chain, I guess.
Mhm.
I feel like that's a terrible analogy. Um,
I can't think of a better one off the top of my head.
yeah, it's like I like emotional hopscotch. You just go down the line. Um,
Yeah, yeah. You take turns and your rhythm is going to be different with each
yeah,
hop compared to the
yeah.
person in front of you. Yeah,
See that
absolutely.
I love perfect. Bounce it off like it's perfect.
Yeah.
So I want to get into a bit about your creative process. So like, what is your creative process like, and are there any particular routines that help you focus on your work?
Let's see. It's pretty sporadic, honestly. If I see a phrase or I hear a song or somebody says something to me that I really like, um, it just kind of happens.
Hmm,
There's not really there's not a nice regimented, predictable pattern. Let's see, beginning of the summer, I was churning out 6 by 8 illustrations, multiples a week. Like I would do an illustration a day. It was
wow.
just a very rich time period, which, when that happens, you take advantage of it and you just throw all the other responsibilities out the window,
Hmm,
um, which can be good or bad. But if it means that I'm producing work, I just kind of follow my nose. And it usually ends up really, really great because I follow kind of my gut instinct, like what feels good that day. Can I pump out 3 pieces in an afternoon? Then I'm going to do that. Am I miserable and absolutely drained? Then I'm not going to beat myself up about
hmm,
it. Um, and it's really kind of a that's a boon of working on your own personal art practice. Like I've had periods of my life where I'm doing commissions and stuff like that, and it's a normal job. You don't have a choice. You're going
hmm,
to spend 8 hours at your desk in order to get
yeah,
something done because you have to get it done. Um, so yeah, I usually just follow my nose, and if a piece shows up, a piece shows up. If I'm having a lot of emotions that day, or, there's a really strong pull towards these particular colors, or I need to investigate. I occasionally do yoga. I do not practice yoga, but I do it because I sit at a desk every day.
yeah,
And so, and this is such an artist thing to do. My foot will be in a specific position and I'll be like, I really like that. I need to write that down. And so I'll have to draw a sketch of my own foot in order to incorporate it in an illustration later, whenever other inspiration hits and I have time to work on it. So
yeah.
yeah, it's pretty sporadic. It's kind of chaos, but it's very fun.
So as you said previously, you keep a sketchbook. So what is your sketchbook? What does your sketchbook actually look like? Like in terms of like, is it notes? Is it pictures? Is it like kind of ideas? Is it scraps of paper?
It is a little bit of everything. So it's one part like I do take notes. I take lots of notes. Sometimes it's a journal. Sometimes I'm writing down something difficult that I'm feeling. I just need to verbally process all that good stuff. Very rarely will I write down an illustration idea. It's usually a place that I go to do basically doodles, because for a long time I I was taught very specifically throughout the years, keep a sketchbook. Doesn't matter if you're into it or not. If you like to draw, you should keep um, something around that you can, you know, just shoot ideas into, put it down, put it away, and it lives somewhere beside your brain.
Yes.
It's a vital practice. But I spent a few years sort of just neglecting it. Seriously, just out of laziness. I just didn't want to do it. It was cumbersome, because I carry this thing the size of my head in my purse where I go now. But I had to get back into the habit of taking it with me basically in every room that I go in. Like if I'm going to be seated somewhere and just relaxing and like not doing anything, I have to give myself the option to not look at my phone and to
Yeah.
do something that isn't necessarily productive. I never tell myself, oh, this is for work, or you haven't processed all the way through this idea from yesterday or whatever. It's just, oh, do you want to draw a fantasy character? Draw a fantasy character. And that's it.
Hmm.
You want to draw a dress you want to make, draw the dress. And I usually end up going down kind of a rabbit hole. I'll end up producing ideas that I never would have pursued. Um, the werewolf thing every now and then, because so much of what I do is rooted in the natural world and anatomy and things like that, I have to spend time studying it. And I enjoy doing that. It's kind of the nerdy naturalist in me is like, oh, I'm going to do a detailed illustration of a butterfly because that's how you treat butterflies. So, I'll study animal skulls and people skulls and sort of morph them together and see what happens because that that sort of scientific experimental step by step process just really helps me think. So my sketchbook is a wild menagerie of receipts from gas stations on road trips and diary entries and these like terrifying skull studies. But yeah, it's just kind of it's one of those things that pretty much every art teacher tells you is important. You should be doing it, and you don't realize how good it is for you, and also like the steps that you need to take personally in order to do it right. You don't realize how vital that is until you're a few years into it. It's basically a project, um, but it's a project about you. It's very personal. It's super intuitive, and I think that's my favorite takeaway from having a sketchbook is it reteaches you every day to follow your gut and to sort of let that 2 a.m. mindset wake back up and be like, oh, I've just gotta try this. It really encourages you to play. So yeah, it's mostly journal entries right now, but there's weird illustrations of cavemen and things like that. So it's a place to have fun. All sketchbooks should be fun. If you're not having fun in your sketchbook, you're doing it wrong. So yeah, super important.
I think I just don't know. There's something that really fascinates me about the idea of sketchbooks because it's like it's almost like your personal history, and then
Mhm.
from that you draw upon what's going to become bigger paintings or images or imagery, or it's kind of like a way for you to decipher yourself through like images,
Very-
text, media. I don't know. It's just, there's something about it that feels very, very personal, but at the same time, it's also very like very eclectic. It kind of speaks a lot about the artist. Like, imagine if you had an exhibition and it was like 10 different artists, or it was their sketchbooks exhibited, and you had to guess which artist was there from there. It's like you probably could do that quite easily because you can kind of tell. Well, that'd be a great idea. We should
Mhm.
make that happen. Um,
That
but
would be
like,
really cool, actually.
because I don't know, there's just something about sketchbooks because it's not a finished piece. We always see finished pieces on social media and we see like, the best of the best. And but sketchbooks are kind of like the mind of the artist as opposed to
Yes.
like the finesse of the artist. And I think that's really interesting. To me, for
Yeah.
like somebody who doesn't have a sketchbook, it's really interesting because it's like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
I'm Jules
that's how
Correct.
this looks. Yeah. Have you heard of the I don't know if they still do it, but I think it was called the Sketchbook Project, and I think it's somewhere in New York City, and it's basically a library full of nothing but
Wow.
sketchbooks.
I know they have,
And
I'm sure they have an Instagram account because I know there is one that I follow that's literally just art sketchbooks. And I like, this is amazing because I love it so much.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's so magical. It's like I want every city to have a repository of artist sketchbooks, like from the local community, just people that live near each other and in the same environment, and just I mean, it makes for such a wonderful what would you call it? Maybe a social study?
Yeah, yeah.
Something along those veins, because yeah, you see into the mind of the artist, and it's basically the flavor of everything that goes into your work. It's a wonderful way to sort of distillate everything that goes on in the background.
It would be really cool to have either a sketchbook swap, so you have like a day where people swap sketchbooks and they have to create a page in the sketchbook, or have like a sketchbook that gets delivered around the world to different people and they all fill out a page. And then when it reaches the end, it's like this object. That would be really cool.
That would be delightful. And like it has to be completed within a set year so
Yeah,
that
so
you've
like
got
every
it's
day,
like
like let's just say a page every day,
hmm
365 pages or something. Well, I don't know how possible that is with, like
yeah, I have no idea.
with like the actual like reach of people. But yeah, so that'd be really cool and interesting to kind of do. But there's like how would you choose the
Mhm.
artists and where does it go? Like there's a lot of nuances to that, but that'd be really interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd really
yeah,
write that down.
that would be a delight.
365 sketchbook. I like that idea actually. Well, that's idea.
Mhm.
Hmm. I'm gonna think about that. Because one thing I want to do in the
Yeah.
future is create like a coffee table book full of artist work. It's like a big portfolio. Something that I would love to do in the
Mhm.
future. I think that'd be really nice because stuff like that's just really cool. Like any kind of physical object with art in it is the best because it's an archive
Mhm.
for the future. The internet is always around, but it's not accessible in the same way always. I don't know.
Mhm.
Anyways,
Yeah, it's sort of a functional archive that you can touch and hold, make comparisons with, almost
yeah,
like a textbook.
yeah. So, how important is it for you to show or document the creative process of your work? Like, do you ever show the failed images?
Yes, actually, I do. I love failed images. And the thing is, when you say a failed image, so I will post them on Instagram. They'll be their own posts. People can look at them. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. There was an illustration in particular that I was very much not happy with, but I posted it anyway because I basically used it as a color study. It was a sketch that I actually did while out of town on a road trip, and it was one of those drawings that I did not for the purpose of making a good illustration, but more to sort of record or commemorate where I was when I did the drawing. It's not always about making something beautiful and finished and oh yes, people are going to want to buy this. It's if you're going to make good work, you have to focus on the process and not worry about is this perfect? Is this sellable? Which I used to do all the time. It was like if I didn't produce a beautiful finished piece of art this day, I've not done my job. That's just not how it works. That is a great way to burn out. And I did several times until I figured out what I was doing wrong. I chronically overload myself with expectations and deadlines that I want to meet just personally. Like,
Yeah,
I want this massive painting done by the end of the month. Well, guess what? There's a whole lot of life in between the end of the month and now. And I've had to I've had to readjust my realistic expectations, and part of that has included doing a failed image because there and this is very optimistic of me. There's no such thing as failure, at least
mm,
when it comes to the creative process. Um, yeah, I completed this illustration from the road trip. I used a color scheme that I had not done before. It was all red and green, and I hate it. I think it's so ugly. I um I liked the colors, but my handling of them, especially in regards to how the color structures the form within the illustration, it was just sloppy. It was clearly not practiced, not very thought out. The actual uh, composition of the body within the box was just kind of contrived. I think it wasn't good, but it was so important for me to draw that sitting at my mother-in-law's dining room table, to actually talking to her about my art process, um, because she was tidbit. She was actually my art history and aesthetics professor.
oh
So every
wow,
time we go back home, I get to like nerd out. It is so much
that's so
fun.
cool.
we're at the dining room table and I'm drawing this thing that, and I don't know how it's going to turn out because all my materials, like my paints and stuff, are back home. So I'm drawing out the form, and she's like, asking me questions about it. And so this really ugly drawing that I'm not super happy with has got these memories baked into it. It's
Mm.
got this experience that's beyond a good or bad drawing. And I think a lot of artists are just a little too hard on themselves.
Yeah.
It's really, and from firsthand experience, it is really hard to give yourself grace. It
Mm.
is. It's really difficult. You know yourself, you know what you're capable of on a good day, and so you expect that level of performance on a bad day, but it's just not reasonable, you know? So, yeah, I love failed images. I'm not afraid to post them the way I would have been several years ago. It's just part of the landscape. You're not gonna, I mean, some people would, over trim their landscape and like, scorched earth style, make it clean and prim. And there's a place for that. I'm not crapping on beautifully manicured gardens and stuff like that, but there's something to be said about a world that has things in it that aren't perfect because
Yeah.
there's always something to be appreciated. So I love
Yeah.
failed images.
Yeah, that's a lovely way to put it. And it's nice because it's like the image has, such a memory for you. So it's
Mhm.
nice because we don't often think about the artist in the process of making the actual image themselves. Because obviously art is a very personal endeavor. And it's like you're not just putting your time into it, but you're putting your mind into it as well. And it's like you're putting your physical presence into the work because the amount of, the time you spend on the work is indicative of obviously the work itself. So I've never actually thought about in terms of like the memory of the actual making of the work as opposed to just the work itself. Because we all just see the work and we're like, oh, this is a beautiful painting, or we don't like this, or what is this, or just see like abstract work where it can seem a bit unreadable, but actually it's not. It might just be about the memory and the time that's associated with the work itself, as opposed to the actual physicality of what the painting is showing or presenting.
Mhm.
Another thing about I should probably rethink the way I think about abstract work actually.
Yeah.
Because that's a
It
really good
changed
point.
the way I thought about it. Like I actually really enjoy abstract work now, especially if it's gone through a really I want to say a good process,
Hmm.
but whatever that means, you can tell when abstract work has been through several sieves, if you will. Like it's been through a certain kind of refinement, and it's because there's experience locked into the surface of the work, and it shows. It shows when you spend time with something, not just on something, but with it. Like
Mm.
I don't know. I've gotten to a point where I don't look at anybody's work and it just is a pretty picture because I can't imagine making artwork today and it not be um, basically a stone tape.
Mm.
You know, there's nothing actually written there, but there's something eerie. There's something that is still a part of that piece of paper that's intangible, and so yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about it. But actually, so talking about actually like the creation of the work itself. So a few artists that I spoke to a long time ago, and several artists in between, have spoken about the idea of loneliness as an artist because you're working, in a studio all day, or you're sitting by your desk, most possibly by yourself all day. And it's like, how do
Mhm.
you combat? Well, firstly, do you ever get lonely whilst creating work? And secondly, if so, how do you combat that?
I do get lonely. It's a very, especially these days, it's a very specific kind of loneliness. Um, I've always been pretty introverted. I get a lot of energy from being with people and talking to my friends and stuff like that, but I always gravitate towards the more introverted activities. I'm pretty happy being in my studio by myself. Um, until I am hurt or upset or whatever, because at the end of the day, whether I like it or not, I am a verbal processor. I gotta bounce off of somebody somewhere, and God bless him, it's usually my husband. But I especially since moving. and moving
Yeah.
again to the middle of nowhere,
Yeah.
it's been it's been challenging. Like a lot of days I'm like kind of more willing than not to face my loneliness on my own because I almost always discover something new in that isolation. It's not necessarily a bad thing to me. It is space to breathe. It's space to really ruminate on whatever is happening, whatever is on my mind, whatever has been presented to me throughout the day. I have a chance to process. Um, and I've always done that. When I was a kid, if I was allowed outside, the first thing I would do is run to the tree line and be in the woods for the next, I don't know how many hours. I would just
Mm.
disappear. And it was great. And I didn't realize how much I was missing that as part of my engagement with the world around me, that good loneliness, that sort of hermit mentality where it's like I'm here alone with a purpose, and that purpose makes this loneliness very rich. You know, it's when you get yourself alone, you have a chance to face your demons, to really chew on stuff. And I just can't do that with everybody around me. So some days I really miss living in a city. I really miss the accessibility of getting a coffee with my friends or something like
Yes.
that. But but I don't know. I don't know that I would trade my isolation for the convenience basically
Mm.
of
Yeah.
social life. I think the lonely artist lifestyle has always suited me. I think it's always been waiting for me. And now that I have it, I really cherish it. I know a lot
Okay.
of people can't do it, but
I feel like not everybody gets the chance
yeah,
to
I
try
like it.
though.
I like being left alone.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. But see, I think that's also the thing. Like, I think because the idea of like artist retreats that people would love to go on, or um, what was I thinking? Like residencies and stuff like that. Like people would love to do that if they had the time and the access to
Yeah.
that. So I think actually I really understand what you're saying in terms of like just having the time to be able to sit with yourself first and foremost. And then from that you can create work because you have a better understanding of yourself. And then, you kind of have time to think about your work. And it's like you're very much involved in what you do because you don't have to think about, for the most part, the outside
Hmm.
world or other stresses and other pressures or driving around the city or that kind of stuff necessarily. So
Yeah. Hmm.
I actually really admire that and I'm slightly envious of that, but I admire it. I think it's a great way to live and it's nice because I feel like we don't think about because I feel like solitude is super important. Maybe just because I'm kind of introverted. Um, but I
You
think
got
feel
a
like just
podcast that interviews people. I think you're a little extroverted.
it's it's weird because it's weird. I can't explain to people. I try and explain to people like yes, when I'm around artists or people that I have got things to talk about, I can be very extroverted. Like, I run a podcast. But if you were to
Yeah.
meet me in real life, I'd probably just stare at you. No, I'm not that bad. But if I meet you in real life, I'm not gonna be like, let's start a conversation necessarily. Although I'm definitely getting better as I get older. But it's weird. Like I used to be extremely introverted when I was younger. So for me, even me doing this is bizarre to me. I've done it for a long time, but like this is bizarre. But anyways, I was gonna say, actually, question for you that I was gonna ask you later, but now would be a perfect time, would be the idea of the question of introversion and extroversion, and that as being an artist. So you said that you are more introverted. Like, do you think that plays a role within your work?
Um, I think it plays a role insofar as I am more willing to spend a lot of time with my thoughts and my emotions.
Mm.
Um, it's actually been really funny this, especially since 2020, there's been this massive wave of everybody go to therapy,
Yeah.
everybody, process whatever it is you're feeling. And it's every now and then it's like, okay, sometimes you're just having a bad day. Uh, sometimes sometimes, emotions and stuff are just a lot. And there's not always a label for what's happening.
Mm.
Um, so it's been really funny. I've been doing this stuff my whole life because I was an only child, and so that also
Oh,
made me more comfortable with solitude. That really
yeah,
helped.
yeah. That would absolutely do it.
I was an only child and I was the art kid. So, I was super awkward. I didn't know how to talk to people to begin with. It was terrible. And so that probably fed into my tendency to be okay with introversion as opposed to extroversion. Because the truth is, you see me, once I get into the right environment,
Yeah.
with shared interests and stuff like that, it's like
Yeah.
boom, boom, boom. I party all night. This is great. But the thing is, once I'm done being at the party, I'm gonna spend the next week by myself
Oh, yeah.
because if I don't recharge, if I'm not left alone, I'll just, I'll be a hot mess. And
Yeah.
that's how I know that I'm probably more introverted than I am extroverted because I could not be like the leader of a sorority or something like that. It just, people will definitely drain me and I will be a hot mess. It's terrible.
I mean, it's good to know where you stand, and also it's good because it helps you create work and it helps you just in your day-to-day life. And it's, I feel like, I feel like introversion, extroversion are always like a sliding scale, depending on the environment. But I feel like it does also allow you to realize, kind of like what you're interested in doing. Because it's like, if you're not, like, if you're introverted, you're not going to necessarily go out to a club. You're not going to go and party. You're going to be like, let's stay at home with a book, or let's go to a coffee shop, or let's, go to an art gallery. There's like places
Mhm.
for you, and it's like just finding. It's about figuring out which places are kind of like your scene and what is going to be comfortable for you at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's a really weird balance. Um, the thing that I've noticed with a lot of introverts is we always like, yes, it's good for the process if you're an artist or if you're doing something creative or very heady. But there's a certain degree of self-reliance and hyper-independence that comes with it.
Mm.
And I'm positive there's plenty of creatives and artists out there who suffer the same struggle of I want to do everything on my own because I know that I can, and then we don't know our limits. Um,
Oh yeah,
the whole extrovert, introvert, ambivert conversation really, because I've got a couple of really good friends who are hardcore extroverts. I mean,
right.
terrifyingly energetic, but I love them. They're sweet. They encourage me. They're just good people, and so we talk about it a lot. And I've noticed in myself that hyper independence is a big part of my willingness to be isolated, my willingness to face my demons and to do it all by myself. Because if I can't do it on my own, uh, I would hate the idea of needing somebody to hold my hand while I do difficult things,
Mm. Yeah,
So the introversion really dangerously feeds into that sometimes. And I think a lot of artists to have to fight with that. You have to recognize unhealthy habits in that way. And it's very hard because you told yourself that habit is helping you, that habit is benefiting you, and it's really it's really draining you and making your life harder, but you're so busy on focusing on productivity and self-control that you don't even notice it. It's
mm.
it's crazy.
That's interesting. That's super interesting. So, going back to your work, do you create more than one
Mhm.
painting at a time?
Depends on the week. This week I most certainly did not do that. Um, That's not true, actually. With these really large pieces, I I could not I couldn't help myself. Um, trying sometimes, especially with the bigger ones, I will want to try something and then I won't quite like it. It won't be a failed thing. It's just, all right, that's how that one turned out because it's watercolors and one of the ways that I sort of comfort myself into being okay with using watercolors, even though I like them, is a certain lack of control. Not every brushstroke is going to come out with a beautiful, clean texture. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit sloppy, and I can't let that ruin a piece. So the way that I handle that is I'll have another piece of paper, um, and I will often lay washes down during the same day, especially if I'm
Mm.
feeling really uppity and want to make life harder for myself. The completionist in me wants to do one piece at a time, but practically speaking, it doesn't often happen. Between the call to experiment and try new things, and just the need to complete pieces to see an idea all the way through, I've started doing more pieces simultaneously. Um, but earlier in the year, my process was very much complete this one illustration, like see it all the way through, babysit it all day long if you have to. But the bigger they get, the more I'm forced to be patient, and the more
Yeah.
I'm forced to implement new habits, basically. So it really depends on the size of the work, I guess, and how willing I am to accept my mistakes that day.
Yeah. So how do you know when a piece of work is finished?
I don't. Um, a lot of these, I guess I could say that I know a piece of work is finished when I look at it and I feel a specific kind of delight looking at it. I see it and my gut reaction is, oh my God, yes, that is delicious. That is wonderful. I like it. And usually I'll let it sit if I get that gut reaction. I've always got to walk away. Um, there's definitely no way to know a piece is finished until you have spent time away from it. Um, and sometimes I'll spend a couple weeks away from a piece of paper that I thought might have been finished, but my gut reaction wasn't 100% yes. And so I knew I have to put it down, gotta walk away. Um, because there have been plenty of times where it was like, I just really want this finished. I just really want to see it, I want it off my plate, basically. And I've in my mind, I've ruined some pieces by doing that.
Mm.
You really can't, at least for me, you really can't force the process,
Yeah.
especially with imagery and techniques that I'm using. If you get heavy-handed in the wrong way, it's game over. You can't quite paint over it. You can't re-gesso these pieces of paper. It has a certain fragility that calls for the sensitivity. Um, so yeah, walking away has been a vital part of knowing when things are done. Um, and it is really hard to walk away sometimes. So
Yeah.
sometimes I'll put them in a frame and stick them on my wall just so like don't
Oh.
touch it, do not touch it, leave it alone, because I'll mess with it and I'll go back with pencil and be like, oh, I want to try this, and the next thing I know, I've literally ruined the surface of the paper, and that's a really
Mm.
hard one for me to gauge because I'll just get wrapped up in what I'm doing, and and I will have chewed through my pencil. There's a nubbin left, and the surface of the paper can't accept any more pigment, so it in regards to that, I'm probably at a point where I'm going to have to sort of reconsider the materials I'm using, the paper, in favor of, I'm not really sure yet, something a little more rigid, but not quite a canvas. Maybe masonite boards that have been gessoed and things like that. But I uh, I haven't worked with those materials since high school, so it would be an all new project. So yeah, we'll see about that.
But it's nice that you're thinking about the longevity and also like kind of like the way in which you are going to develop. Because it's not just about you doing the same thing every single day. You want to evolve as an artist. You want to try new things, experiment, see how your work changes how you change. You know?
Yeah, I would hate to be stagnant. I would
Mm.
hate to be a kid who is content with only one Lego set. No, no, no. I want all other Lego sets too. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's if you're not willing to try new things, you're never gonna grow, you're never gonna change. So
I mean,
yeah.
for some artists, that's okay though, because some artists don't need to grow and change because they've found like that sweet spot which sells. But then I
Hmm.
also do feel like personally, like at a personal level, surely you'd want to be like, let's do this or let's try that. Or it depends actually, I guess, on why you're creating art. If art is just like a means to an end, or if it's, a reason for existence. There are two different reasons, or not just the two different
Big
reasons, but
time.
there are two different parts of one scale, one very long scale. Um, but yeah, but I was going to ask you, like, how has your work changed as you've gotten older?
Oh gosh. Um, Night and day. Um, the older I get, the more interested I am in like I've got the skills to do the things that I want. So it's stopped being about worrying about my technical proficiency. It used to be, wow, I need to do figure studies. I've got to work with these reference images because I still can't draw fur, or I don't know how this joint works. I have to go study this bone and things like that. And I would never say, oh, I'm done doing those things. I'm absolutely not. I have a, this is a little bit macabre, but I'm an artist, so it's okay. I have a box of skulls
That's cool. I think that's really cool, actually,
of
personally.
different animals. I've got a possum. I've got I'm pretty sure I love it. And
Mm.
I love that I live in a place now where I can like pull them out of the box instead of keep them in storage
Yeah.
because when I was in school and I'm in the dormitory, my roommates would always be like, "Oh my God, what is that dead thing on your desk?" And I would try to explain to them. I was like, "Oh yeah, you've got to look at the structure of this joint and check out these feathers. Like look at the down and how it like actually applies underneath. Like it's beautiful." And they're mortified, of course. Um, God bless my one-time roommate who put up with me bringing in cicadas. She was not happy about that, but she let me do it because she understood. Still my best friend today, who let me be weird. But yeah, I've got a box of skulls that I pull out, and I'll study them. I've got a couple of deer. I've got it, and it's kind of sad. I see these objects and I think about the thing that used to be alive. Like there was a dog skeleton that my dad and I found on a hike,
Wow.
and it was sad. Like there was the trail went under a bridge, under an overpass of a highway, so I can only assume that it was hit by a car.
Mm.
And it's it feels kind of reverent to notice that it has a fracture above one of its orbital sockets. So it probably had a head injury, and that's probably what it succumbed to. But yeah, so I'll take those out to study, and every now and then I'll go back to studying. But for the most part, everything is just so off the cuff, and it feels really good to be at a place in my artistic process. Like I feel like an adult when it
Mm.
comes to making art. In other ways, not so much. Everything else is still wild, hot mess. But I feel like a grown up when it comes to art, because I can finally take the tools that I've acquired over the decades, and I can just pump out the ideas that I've always wanted to put into the world. Like these werewolves, I mean, when I was a kid, I loved Halloween. I really did. And I grew up in a very conservative Christian environment. So
Oh,
Halloween was kind of iffy,
yeah.
but nobody said no to it. It's like if you want to dress up and go get candy, that's fine, but we're not doing anything else. And I was like, all right, trunk or treat at the church and stuff like that. So I kind of, I put a damper on a lot of those interests, and I always wanted to dress up as a werewolf for Halloween because I thought it was cool. I was
Yeah.
like, how wonderfully terrifying is this? The synthesis of beast and man. This is terrifying. It's the perfect costume. It's easy to make. I thought it was cool. Um, and I didn't, I had all these interests, but I didn't really have a way to create them in new ways that really pleased me. And today, I've gone from trying to practice illustrating scenes from the Chronicles of Narnia, which was always fun. The Dawn Treader was one of my favorite things to try to illustrate because it just had the most beautiful colors. But I've gone from that to synthesizing my own ideas,
Mm.
and it's been really freeing. It's been really fun, and it's probably the biggest facet of, as far as how things have changed.
Yeah.
It's my art process is my own today
Yeah.
in a way that it has never been before. So
See,
it's
that's
really
brilliant
fun.
though, because that's exactly what you want. You want to be at a place where you just feel at one with the work and that you feel like you're doing what is natural to you, not what is forced, not what you should be doing, or what you think society tells you should be doing. It's what you want to do. And the fact that people are receiving it
Mhm.
and they're enjoying it and they're liking it and they're buying it, that's just a bonus at the end of the day, you know?
Yeah. I mean, if in regards to that, if I was in a place in my life where I couldn't turn this into a business, which is still terrifying
Hmm.
and still very hard, I would still probably be drawing things at 2 a.m.
Hmm.
Um, for nobody to see, for no one to enjoy but me. Um, because I can, you
Yeah.
know. It's like you finally learn how to what code you need to make your program do exactly what you want, and you're like, I'm just going to play with it. I'm going to go break some things. And that that particular kind of freedom is it's life changing, and not everybody has it. I feel like I've gotten really lucky being able to do that. It just kind of one of those things that just kind of happened, you know.
It's lucky, but it's also a product of your hard work. This is the thing. Like, I feel like a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm lucky at being in this situation." It's like, yeah, but it's because you're working on it, which is why it's happening. I feel like if you weren't doing anything
I
towards,
hope so.
yeah, but if you weren't doing anything towards creating new work or being interested or kind of even thinking about what you're doing or even, having the inclination to make it into a business, then it's not going to happen, is it? So yes, it is luck. Definitely, part of it is definitely luck
Mhm.
because I think all artists need some form of luck. But I think it's also hard work as well. I think we shouldn't sweep that under the rug and forget about that because it's not easy. It's like being an artist is so damn hard. It's not easy, even just to even to break even. You know, not even to make a profit, not even to make a good living, just to break even. But even just to create a piece of work, whether people see it or not. The mental
Mhm.
games, the mindset you have to be in, the kind of self validation you have to give yourself. It's not easy. So I think to
Mhm.
any artist really, like they're doing a good job, and it's about hard. They're putting in the work. It may not always be rewarded, and it may not always seem like it's being rewarded, but it's worth doing. It's the effort you're putting in.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, it's a constant struggle
Yeah.
to say, yes, I've done a good job today. Yes, I've sacrificed in order to make this happen and things like that. But, I'm also painfully keenly aware that a lot of for the most part, I've been able to make my own sacrifices and make my own choices because other people have already done those things ahead of me. You know, um, I was lucky enough to be an only kid. I got all of my parents' attention.
Mm.
um, which also meant that I got to go to school. I got to go get a degree for this. And, I look back on experiences like that and I'm like, I had nothing to do with this. Like,
Mm.
sure, I made A's, but do you have any idea how easy high school is? Because I remember how easy high school was. And I'm not talking about AP Bio. That was a different kind of difficult. But I could still pass school and get A's and get a scholarship and stuff like that. It didn't feel like a big deal at the time. And maybe for some people it is a massive deal. Some people who have learning disabilities or,
Yeah.
just school very well. Like, you know, for them, that's a huge win. For me, it was, you know, here's some opportunities on a silver platter and, pick one and just go somewhere and just do something and be on your own, get out from under your parents' roof. It was just, it was a one-way ticket to, you have a chance to follow your dreams, which is part of the reason why I took it.
Yeah.
My dad
Of course.
sacrificed a lot for me to go to school and worked really hard for that. So it was like, I'm going to have to give it a shot.
Yeah.
Um, so in that regard, it is so easy to be like, I didn't do this. I didn't even imagine ever saying that I did. So it is really hard to say, yes, I'm sacrificing, yes, I'm working hard. Because for me, this is the dream. It's a little bit masochistic, but this is the dream. This is what I wanted. It's, it's scary and it's difficult, but and I can't remember if my dad said this to me or if I said it to my dad. The hardest things are usually the best things.
Mm.
Almost always. And are in a really cruel twist of irony. Like having kids. Oh my God. It's incredibly difficult in every way, every step of the way. I wouldn't equate art to quite being the same thing. But it's consciously making sacrifices every day and doing really scary things, letting go of a lot of security, stuff like that. It's like I don't see that as working hard. I see that as being reckless and just being kind of gutsy, which, is a skill in and of itself, big time. Yeah.
So, talking about like the larger scale of art, like, do you feel like you're part of a larger art community?
Yes and no. In light of living in sort of an isolated environment, I've got sort of a budding art community in the next town over, but it's an hour away. Again, I can't just hop up and go get a cup of coffee. Living in a big place like this really does have an effect on, whether or not I choose to go get a coffee with somebody. Like I've got somebody who saw my pieces that were recently hanging in this next town over, and she was like, really encouraging and passionate about it. She was like, "This is beautiful. I want to have an in-person conversation with you about these." And I'm like, "Yes, of course. Of course I want to do that." But I have to factor in like how far am I going to drive?
Mm.
How much is gasoline going to cost? You know, how incredibly busy is downtown going to be on this summertime weekend? Because the weird thing about Arizona is, you know, populations are very concentrated. You go where the civic centers are because, there's water, um, and hospitals and things that will keep you from being, murdered by the landscape. It's a harsh environment. So, it's hard on everything. So really, I've been trying to focus a lot on an online community, which is super new for me. I've never been really into online communities in general. I didn't know what a Reddit was until college. Um, uh, it's it's kind of a brand new world for me, figuring out how to navigate that and how to foster relationships because I'm so introverted, I'm also really reliant on like my favorite methods for communicating with people. Like if we were having this interview with no video,
Yeah.
I would be dying. This would be so hard for me because I couldn't read your face.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I
That's why I
can't.
said, that's exactly why I said, oh, don't worry
Mhm.
about the video because we're not gonna have nobody will see the video. But if you have your video camera on, it'll be so much easier for me because I've
Yeah,
done a few interviews and the person didn't want to be on camera. And I'm like, that's fine, but it's going to be a bit awkward because I don't know when you're going to finish speaking, you know. And not
exactly.
just that, I don't
It's
understand. I don't know if you're interested, if you're paying attention, if you look bored, if you're doing something else, if you're painting your nails, if you could be doing anything else, and I have no idea. So yeah, I
yeah,
100% agree with that. 100% agree. Sorry, I'm just like
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Yeah. So, in regards to like keeping up with people on Instagram, like I told a friend recently, I was like, I've never had internet friends,
Mm,
like I've never had ongoing chats with people who live on the other side of the world, because I don't know them, I can't see their face, I don't know what they sound like, I you know, can't read them. It doesn't quite feel like real relationships, but it feels like a relationship in a very modern sense. There's another person who's somewhere on the other side of the US. She's a watercolorist. And like, we basically just vibe on Instagram chats. Like, we'll just DM each other a meme every now and then. I've never spoken to this person, you know?
oh,
Um, so it's really hard to figure out, like, okay, at what point in this so-called relationship can I say, please give me feedback on this, or I've had a really hard day, or wow, I just don't want to do this anymore. Um, it's really, for me, it's really hard to have those conversations in a remote setting. It's
yeah,
a very, it's sort of like wanting to experience artwork, but never seeing it in a gallery and never seeing it in person. It's all about communication, it's about relationships, it's about authenticity. And it's really weird and really different to try and do that from my spaceship on a hill somewhere in the desert because nobody can get to me.
mm,
It's like, it's really hard. I it feels like a community, but it is a different community than I've ever really experienced, I
mm.
think. Sometimes I feel like an old lady because everything's online and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I just have to trust that people are going to meet me halfway
Yeah,
sometimes because like if nobody responds to the message, then nothing's ever going to come of it. Nothing's ever going to happen. I won't ever talk to anybody. So
Yeah.
it's a really weird situation to be in. To live in an extremely rural area and kind of cope, enjoy my isolation, but also coping with a really weird lack of community. It does kind of remind me of, gosh, I'm trying to think of a good example. Gauguin is a really good one. He lived on an island and nobody spoke English and he suffered a lot, but he created the most incredible work without a community. And if I remember correctly, he did go back and forth to Europe. I think he made it back a couple times, but he died out there alone. So I don't want that as an artist. And I don't want other artists to want that either. Because art is ultimately about communication and community. And I hate it when people shut that down. So it's kind of a brave new world with technology involved. The way that we're using it in regards to art, it's kind of, I don't know. It's really strange. I haven't figured it out yet, honestly.
Fair enough. My advice would be send voice notes. That's my advice.
Really? Does it really help?
Because because it's way more personal than text. You hear a person's voice, you hear how they feel about a certain thing they're saying. You hear their voice. That gives you a connection to that person. It makes you feel like more personal and more relatable to that person. That's why I send.
Yeah.
That's why I send you voice messages and I don't know you. So I send technically random artists, strangers on the internet voice messages all the time. What I do is it's one of the few things that I've done. It's actually probably one of the most beneficial things I've done in terms of talking to people and getting kind of, because the thing is, like, if I send you a voice message before we did the podcast, I'm sure you'll be much more relaxed and kind of knowing what to expect, as opposed to if I just sent you texts all the time and you'd be like, okay, cool. It's just for me, I've just learned it's more personal and it kind of gives me personally, maybe, good or bad, but it gives me the sense of like, okay, this person wants to spend time actually recording this message. Because I don't know anybody who likes hearing their own voice, myself included.
No.
But the fact that you kind of overcame that hurdle to record yourself talking and then send it to me, like, I find that personally very touching. Maybe it's just me, but yeah, that's
It
my
was
advice.
touching though. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have exactly. We have one friend who seems to do it often, and he will send a voice text, and I thought it was the weirdest thing. I was like, okay, Grandpa, what, you can't type? But after having him do it a few times, I kind of get it, like that I want you to hear my voice. I want you to hear my excitement. I want you to
Yeah.
hear, all of my quirks that come with vocal expression.
Yeah.
And yeah, that actually makes me sort of reconsider some of my feelings about including my face in videos of myself on
Yeah.
Instagram and on Patreon, stuff like that, because like you said, nobody likes to hear themselves.
Absolutely.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
I hate recordings of my voice. Like, when you get done editing this,
Yes.
don't ask me my opinion or anything. Just do what you think is best, because I would tell you to burn the tapes. I don't want to hear this. But it does make such a huge difference when you can form that connection. So I might find myself a little more open to plastering my own face and my own vocals on my account now than I was before, because it really does make a difference. It's very convincing,
I think also with voice notes specifically is that they're very, very immediate and they're just quicker. For me, they're quicker. I don't have the amount of people I talk to,
Yeah.
I don't have the time to type paragraphs of text to people. And also not just that, you can get all of your thoughts out at once in a very, very, very delirious way. But it's kind of also like, yeah, it's just like excitement, and you think about this and you think about that. And like my voice notes, I have a particular artist friend, and we send each other like 40-minute voice notes because like I just kind of go back and forth between different things I'm thinking about, and it's kind of like I don't know. For me, I find it really fun. It's like the probably the easiest way I think I communicate online, which is weird because it's not even. It's weird because it's very more analog than it is online, but it's just easy for me. I don't know. So, what has creating art taught you about yourself?
Oh, about myself. Um, that my sensitivity is not a weakness, for one
Mm,
thing. It learning taking the time to learn how to process my own thoughts. Um, I don't know. I I feel like I spent a lot of time, you know, college and all before my entire life, up until about 5 years ago. I thought I knew myself,
mm,
and that's partly due to being a young person. Like it takes time to understand yourself, but going through the process of becoming an artist, developing a style, experimenting, um, really putting myself outside my comfort zone, it's probably taught me that I am a massive control freak, um, for better or worse. Sometimes that's very useful. Um, I'm for the most part, I'm very organized. I am good at sort of getting things done. Um, but at the same time, I've had to learn in order to be able to get stuff done and use that control freakness to my advantage. I've had to learn that I need time to be alone. That isolation is an important facet of how I handle life. Um, it's I've learned that I'm really, how do I put it? I think when you're an artist and you choose to be an artist every day and it becomes a way of life, you become this dowsing rod for um, experiences. Not all of them are good. Um, in sort of a really annoying way, I'm always picking up on something, picking up on, strong feelings, or this place feels weird, or wow, something's really under my skin today. And instead of shoving that down, um, and waiting for it to boil over somewhere else, I've learned that for me personally, it is art making is vital. It's if I wasn't doing this for a living, I'd probably have to do it um, for my mental health,
yeah,
just so that it feels really good to take the intangible that is frustrating and frightening and doesn't make sense and just seems like a massive convenience. It feels really good to take that and put it down somewhere in some way. If it's creative writing, if it's doodle, if it's a full-on painting, um, like great example. If I'm afraid of the future, I'm probably going to watch history documentaries, and I'm probably going to hand sew something.
mm,
Um, you know, learning things like that, it feeds into the control freak. It feeds into it caters to all these different quirks of my personality in a positive, beneficial way. Um, Making art has taught me to pay attention to those things. Um, I think that's made me a better person, or at least easier to live with. Um, I don't know. Creating art has taught me to be more patient with myself and with others. Um, that not everything has to be perfect, that all of your experiences are important, even if they are mundane. Um, yeah, it's one big eye-opening experience. And I wish that everybody understood that that was the point of making art, is to experience and to dive into the deep end, at least every now and then. It's because it's hard to do, and I get why people don't want to do it. It's
mm.
very immersive.
See, that's really beautiful. I actually really like the fact that it's taught you a lot of different things in, both personally and also just like artistically. I think that's really the best
Mhm.
thing because it's kind of art changes people. I think we forget that. and we don't realize that. Like being a creative and having an outlet and having the ability to be able to create work, it really changes you. Sometimes for the better, well, mostly for the better. Sometimes for the worse, but mostly for the better. I think most artists are very. They're just kind of they're more well-rounded people because they have like more of a purpose. I think maybe. Um, I don't know. I think it's always interesting. So I have a
Mhm.
question for you from the last artist I interviewed, a very, 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 very cool artist called John Hayward Wellington. And his question for you is, what advice would you give to your younger self about being an artist?
You know, my poor younger self. I put her through so much. Um, you know, I think I would tell her to stop waiting for other people to give her advice. Stop waiting in general to do anything. Um, and it's hard to say. It's hard like you can't tell your younger self things like that
Yeah,
because at the end of the day, that person couldn't know because that person is a completely different person from who you are now.
yeah,
There were certain experiences that you had to go through. So I would like to be angry at my younger self, but that's literally not reasonable. You know,
yeah.
it could lots of things just couldn't be helped. But I wish that I had been more willing to dive into the deep end like I am now. I
Yeah.
wish that I was doing this sooner. I wish that I was pushing harder sooner. Um, I think my advice to her would be to be more rebellious. Honestly,
Mm,
be a punk. Be a be a pain in the butt sometimes because I was a really good kid. I was very polite. I was
yeah.
very obedient. I did my homework and I didn't stay out late. You know, I didn't go to house parties. I was so boring. Oh my God, I
Oh
was
yeah,
so
no,
boring.
I can
Um,
definitely relate to that
and I,
for sure.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I wish that she had pushed herself and been a little more reckless. It would
mm,
have been a good thing. I wish I'd learned to ride a motorcycle sooner.
oh,
My mom scared me out of that. My advice to her, that's a great segue. My advice to her would be to not let other people's fears make her decisions for her. Um, in every facet of life,
that's good
especially
advice
in
for people
art
in general.
making. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's the thing about art and art making, and it's people think it's this secret, difficult, hyper personal. Oh my God, it's so special and sacred. No, no, no. Art making is experiencing life. I just so happen to be putting it down on paper, and you're not. You
mm,
know,
yeah.
like yeah. I think all advice to artists is applicable to people who are not artists. They just don't know it. So yeah, don't let other people's fears influence you.
That's just really good advice because it's so true. It's so true.
Mhm,
Like just
mhm.
yeah, it's not a segue I'm going to go into, but yeah, that's just so true. Like I really understand that, and it's just insane how when you look back, you kind of realize like, yeah, I could have done this and I could have done that, and but then one thing I would like to say is that like the fact that you didn't do those things sooner is why you are where you are now. And had you did those things sooner, you wouldn't be where you are now. You might have been, sure, you might have been in a better position, but you also might not have been here, in this particular moment in time, doing the
Yeah,
thing you love doing in a situation that you love doing. So it kind of worked out in the end, even if you had to go through a bit of fire to get here.
yeah, yeah. Which is something that I've had to tell my present self quite a
Yeah,
bit is,
yeah.
everything, you know, a lot of people would argue this is not true, but everything happens for a reason.
I was just about to say that.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah. Timing. Yeah, timing is everything, and you can't always do everything now. You have to realize like there are times for things. Just because you want to
yeah,
do something doesn't mean it's the right time for you to do it. Just because it feels like you might want to
very,
do something doesn't mean you should do it. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. 100%
yeah,
agree with that.
yeah.
I'm very much on that level.
Always good
So, do you have a
stuff.
question for the next artist I interview?
Mm. Yes, I thought of a really good one this morning. Let's see. I thought of it and then I didn't. I was like, oh yes, that's juicy, and then I didn't write it down. Um, I guess from a very practical standpoint, um, how do you maintain a healthy artistic practice? You know, in regards to basically work-life balance, which is something that I personally struggle with all the time, have not found an answer, certainly not one that's satisfactory. You're supposed to get 8 hours of sleep a night. I get 5 or 6.
Same, yeah,
Um,
absolutely. 5
tops.
is a good night.
You know, and that's terrible for you. There's all of these things that are outside of my art practice that heavily affect it. And I can never seem to find a balance. And everybody's different. Everybody's going to have, um, a different rhythm that helps them create and still be able to eat and keep breathing. But, I would love to hear how other people handle that, because most of the time it feels like absolute chaos to me. It's like, oh, you want to eat lunch? Well, you better just check and see what's in the fridge. And if it's just chips and salsa, that's what you're eating. Instead of being responsible in meal planning and stuff like that. Because I would much rather get wrapped around the axle in the studio than, in the kitchen or worrying
Yeah,
about whether or not I've swept this week.
yeah.
So it's this, it's a weird balance of practical activities with the very heady process of making art at all. Um, so yeah, I would love to hear how the next artist handles a work-life balance. How do you keep your mind and your spirit healthy amidst all the demands of existence?
So I have a good friend called Randy Hart, and we had a conversation a long time ago now, probably, in which we spoke about the idea of which is more important, the personality of the artist or the skill of the artist.
Personality or the skill? I would immediately argue the personality,
Hmm.
um, because it's what's a good comparison for that? I think I think the idea of the lonely artist, the idea of the isolated, brooding weirdo who lives at the back end of town is silly. I don't think, it's not inherently healthy. I think I think if you're going to choose to be an artist, you have to be willing to accept the fact that you're a massive part of a community that you may or may not understand. And so, as far as personality goes, you have to be willing to participate. You have to be willing to communicate to a certain extent. You have to, like, you can have an agent that handles all the little stuff for you and handles boring conversations for you. That's part of it, especially if you're a very big artist. You need that. I get that.
Hmm.
It's not about that. It's about um are you willing to expose yourself, pretty much, because art is personal. Art is personal and visual at the same time. And that has nothing to do with your technical skill. I think a lot of I think people who make really good artists are people who are willing to be a part of the synthesis and the creation of conversations around artwork. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room. Matter of fact, I would discourage that.
Hmm.
But it is incredibly vital to be a willing player, because you live in a world that is very social, and you cannot get away from that. In a very ancient sense, artists have always been sort of the mouthpiece of the people. A lot of things that we know about ancient cultures come from the creatives. They come from people who were carving or were, making a handprint on a cave wall or something like that. We wouldn't know anything about these people if they didn't futz around and say, hey, come play with this iron oxide I just found, you know? And that boils down to personality, not skill so much. And I don't want to crap on people who aren't extroverted. It's not about being introverted or extroverted. It's just about understanding your role as an artist in your community. And skill can just be thrown out the window. You can be a collage artist who's really good with an X-Acto knife, but you can't draw a circle, you know? And you're still filtering and processing the world around you and the people that you experience and, you know, world events and things like that. That has nothing to do with skill. It has to do with a willingness to participate, a willingness to try new things, to experiment, and to, you know, to let other people see it, at least sometimes. And even if you don't let other people see it, you're still the equivalent of that lonely monk somewhere in the north of England, you know, illustrating a manuscript. Nobody's ever going to meet that monk. We don't know the names of many of these people who created these works, but they've had a global impact because they were there to translate the atmosphere of the time onto paper to a certain extent. And they were willing to do that. Many of them were very skilled. I'm not.
Yeah, of course.
I can't downplay that, but they were willing to put in the time and to be a part of that community. So I would say that skill is a useful tool, but who you choose to be in using that skill is, at least to me, massively more important than whether or not you're a master of your craft. So
That's
it's just
nicely
me.
said. That's very nicely said. And do you think that anyone could be an artist?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't. It drives me crazy when people are like, "I can't draw." I'm like, "You haven't tried." I can't. I can't rebuild an engine, but I'm actually trying to do that this summer. I'm not doing a very good job.
Good
Um,
idea.
I ruined a carburetor bowl a couple weeks ago, and I'm not really sure how to handle it. But I'm trying. You know, it's of course. I mean, I'm not going to be a mechanic overnight, but if you know, especially when it comes to the creative field, everybody has a touch of that part of humanity that wants to process the world around us. Um, Again, cavemen painting their hands on walls,
Yeah.
not particularly skillful. You know, their skill probably went into processing the pigment just to make the handprint, and they didn't have time or resources for anything else. And I'm sure there's some people who would say that's not really art. That's not really, you know, nobody would hang that in a museum. I would, because there is an incredibly unique experience now locked in that stone wall. That looks like art to me. It feels like art. And so, in that way, yeah, anybody can be an artist. It just depends on whether or not you're willing to process the world around you into physical means. So, yeah,
Yeah.
because it's universal.
So, in your opinion, what does it mean to be a successful artist?
It depends on what you want out of it. Um, what does it mean to be a successful woodworker? What does it mean to be a successful accountant? Um, do you want to make a certain amount of money every year? Do you want to be in the Met? Do you want to tell the richest people in the world how to invest their money? Like, success is such a moldable concept that I don't think you can really nail it down, unless it's for you personally. So for me personally, a successful artist is somebody who doesn't stop, you know, and for the most part, that's really all it boils down to. Are you willing to keep showing up? Are you willing to be here and keep experiencing what's around you, whether or not it's happy, whether or not it's easy? To me, that's success. is that you kept showing up every day. And at the end of your lifetime, however long or short it is, you will have a record of your existence. And for me, that would be pretty successful. At the end of the lifetime, art is as good as normal ephemera. It's still just kind of pretty pictures, but like it's such a weird thing to place value on art beyond the monetary, because it totally alters your idea of success. Like, of course, I want to make money off my art. I would like to eat.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
I
would
would
be
like to
helpful.
pay rent. It helps with things. You can't make art if you're dead.
Yeah.
So yeah, success to me spans beyond today. Success would be a lifetime of investment. Because I think there is something eternally and perpetually valuable about how much time is spent in a place or on a project experiencing things. I think, because time is one of it is
So a lot of the work seems to have
arguably
like
one
a
of
sense.
the most valuable non-renewable resources. You cannot get it back. We exist in this one frame of existence. You can't go forward, you can't go back. This is the present. You are here. And it's terrifying. But if, all of those moments are added up and poured into something, you have a record of all of that time. And I feel like there's something incredibly valuable in that. And, the more time you have the opportunity, you have the blessing to keep pouring into something in particular that is personal and interpretive, that's success to me. Um, if you spend a lifetime carving some ridiculously massive headboard, but it took a lifetime to do it, that thing is inherently incredibly valuable. Um, so I think success lies somewhere in there, not necessarily making it into museums or being some big shot with lots of opinions that everybody wants to hear, because one day nobody's going to remember you, and what will have been the point? So, you know, success as an artist is extremely very meta, very existential for me.
Yeah.
Um, Money just doesn't cut it. Money is a tool. Money is nice to have, but I just couldn't do this if it was about money. It wouldn't make sense. So yeah.
So the second to last question is what would your younger self think about your work?
Mm. I think she would love it. I think she I think she would be delighted to see um, the product of so many years of experiences. Um, so many of them not good, so many of them hard to swallow. I think she would be relieved to know that when she prayed for wisdom and understanding, when she was hoping for something bigger and more meaningful, that she found it. Um, that it found her, that she was met with something that sort of made up for all of the things that were uncomfortable or that hurt. But yeah, I think she would be delighted. I think she'd be really surprised. Like, wow, you actually did that? And it's not an oil painting, like you're doing watercolors. I thought that we quit doing that. Um, yeah, I think she'd be really pleased. Bewildered, but pleased.
That's perfect. That's
So
really
yeah.
sweet. That's such an interesting question to ask people because I could always see people think about themselves when they're younger, when they answer. So I think it's really cool actually. It's really cool. It's nice. It's quite reflective. I like that. So the very last question, which will be, I'm sure you'll be very happy to know, is still a bro question, which is what are you currently working on and where can people find more about you and your work?
Currently, I am working on large scale versions of my original work. The body of paintings that I've been calling Kynocephali is getting larger, and I'm very excited. I'm branching out into new materials. I'm working on having a Patreon set up, which is very exciting. I've never done it before. And I really hope that that becomes a platform for community, for people who like what I do and want to talk about it and want to get some free stuff, because I am a little goblin and I love stickers and I love bookmarks and small, really pretty pieces of paper. So that's kind of between the really big paintings and building a community on Patreon. I'm very wrapped around the axle with both of those right now. So yeah, if people want to find out more and like make connections, the Patreon is a great place to go. It's brand new, and I'm actually currently running a poll looking for suggestions for what people would like to have in their mailbox or their inbox, because I want to give people the things that they like. And Instagram is also a great place. I post pretty much every day. I don't post on weekends because I don't want to lose my mind, but I'm, for better or worse, I'm pretty much always on there, and I love hearing from people. I love getting feedback. I I I haven't advertised it as much as I probably should, but I love difficult conversations. I would love for people to be comfortable reaching out to me to be like, why are the werewolves naked? Or, why don't you change up your color palette? Just anything. Ask anything. So, yeah, find me on Patreon, Instagram, and my email inbox is always open. So, yeah.
Phelan, thank you so much for doing this and for being here and for your time. I really appreciate it a lot.
Likewise. Thank you so much for reaching out to me.
That concludes the second part of my conversation with artist Phelan Harris. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions or comments about it, please send me a message at theflyingfruitbowl@gmail.com or get in touch via social media sites such as Instagram and Twitter. The Flying Fruit Bowl podcast can be found on a variety of sites such as Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you like the show, please consider rating, reviewing, sharing, or subscribing on any of those platforms to help spread the word. Also, don't forget to check out theflyingfruitbowl.co.uk for daily art inspiration. And if you're a creative, please get in touch for a chance to be featured or interviewed. If you'd like to support the platform further, we also have a Patreon page. Tiers start from £1, and more information can be found over at patreon.com/theflyingfruitbowl. If monthly donations are not your thing, we also have PayPal for one-time donations. I'll include a link to our PayPal in the show notes. Once again, thank you very much for listening to the episode today. And until next time, folks, please stay safe.